So, who's really running the show in the U.S. housing market? You might think it's all about the Millennials and Gen Z finally breaking in. But is that the whole story? Well, we're going to dig into that. We've got the latest generational trends report from the National Association of Realtors, and it tells a fascinating story about who's buying, who's selling, and most importantly, why.
All right, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll get a quick snapshot of who the major players are right now. Then we'll get into the why, what's motivating people to buy, and what their dream homes actually look like. From there, we'll tackle the money side of things, the financial code, if you will. And finally, we'll look at who's passing on the keys, the sellers, which really completes the whole picture.
Okay, so first up, a generational housing snapshot. Let's really get a feel for who holds the power in today's market. And honestly, the answer might not be what you're expecting.
You see all these headlines about millennials finally taking over the housing market, right? But the data, well, it tells a slightly different story. It turns out it's actually the baby boomers who are the single largest group of homebuyers. Yeah, you heard that right. When you combine both the younger and older boomers, they make up a massive 42% of all home purchases. Pretty incredible.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Their influence just explodes when you look at who's selling. Boomers don't just lead on this side of things. They absolutely dominate. They make up more than half, 53% of all home sellers. So think about that. This one generation is the most powerful force in real estate, basically controlling both the supply of homes and a huge piece of the demand.
All right, so we know who is buying. Now let's get into the why. What's actually pushing them to make a move? As you can imagine, each generation is coming from a totally different place in life, with completely different goals.
And this right here just lays out that generational divide so perfectly. For younger millennials, it's all about the dream of ownership itself, that deep, fundamental desire to have a place to call your own. But for older boomers, it's a completely different game. Their number one priority is being closer to friends and family. It's a move driven by relationships, not just real estate.
And as we look across the board, each generation really has its own unique profile. I mean, check this out. A staggering 71% of younger millennial buyers are doing this for the very first time. Then you've got Gen X, who stand out as the highest earners, which gives them some serious buying power. Boomers, they're the ones making the big moves, relocating a median of 35 miles away. And the silent generation, they're often focused on very specific needs, with more than a quarter of them buying senior-related housing.
And speaking of Gen X, they're often called the sandwich generation, right? Well, that plays out here too. They are, by far, the most likely group to buy a multi-generational home. And it makes sense. It's often a super practical choice, either to save money or to take care of aging parents.
So with all these different reasons for buying, it's no surprise that people are looking for different types of homes. The dream home really does look very different depending on where you are in life.
Okay, this table really tells the whole story. You can see the trade-offs everyone's making. Younger millennials? They're getting their foot in the door with smaller, older homes. We're talking a median of 1,600 square feet, built back in the early 80s. Gen X, with their higher incomes, they're grabbing the biggest spaces. And look at how long people plan to stay. Younger boomers are settling in for the long haul, a full 20 years, longer than any other group.
And here's another huge split. New construction versus previously owned homes. It's night and day. A whopping 91% of younger millennials are buying used homes, probably looking for better value and maybe a little bit of character. But on the flip side, younger boomers are the most likely to buy a brand new place. For them, it's all about avoiding the hassle and cost of renovations.
So, all of this brings us to the biggest question of all, the money. How in the world are different generations managing the financial side of buying a home in today's market?
I mean, let's be real. Especially for younger buyers, the hurdles can feel gigantic. You've got sky-high prices, you've got student debt, so seriously, how are they affording a down payment?
Well, here is a massive piece of that puzzle. A full one-third of younger millennial buyers got help with their down payment either as a gift or a loan from family and friends. This kind of financial help from one generation to the next is becoming absolutely critical for getting that first foot on the property ladder.
And of course, we can't talk about finances without talking about the elephant in the room, student debt. The median younger millennial buyer is carrying around $30,000 in student loans. That is a major financial weight that directly cuts into their ability to save up for a home.
So what this all paints a picture of are two completely different financial journeys to owning a home. You have younger buyers who are, for all intents and purposes, building their wealth from scratch. They're relying on their own personal savings. But then you have older buyers who are tapping into the wealth they've already built up,
More than 60% of older boomers are just rolling the equity from their last home sale right into their next one. Okay, to get to full 360-degree view, let's flip the coin and look at the sellers. Because really, their choices and their reasons for selling are the other half of this whole market equation.
And I love this slide because it shows the kind of beautiful symmetry of the housing market. Younger millennials who are selling are almost always upsizing. They're looking for more room as their families get bigger. At the same time, you have the silent generation who are typically downsizing, selling off those larger family homes they just don't need anymore, often to the very people who do.
The amount of time people stay in a home really tells a story too. Younger millennials are on the move after just 5 years, which makes sense, right? It's a time of rapid change in their lives. And that time frame just gets longer and longer with each generation, all the way up to older boomers, who tend to stay put for about 16 years before they decide to sell.
So, after looking at all this data, what are the big picture takeaways? Well, first, there's no question about it. Baby boomers are the most powerful force in the housing market today on both the buying and selling sides. Second, younger generations are really driven by that dream of ownership, but man, they're up against some serious financial hurdles. Third, for older generations, it's all about lifestyle changes, moving to be closer to family and friends. And finally, you can really see how the market is this big cycle where older folks sell the larger homes that growing younger families are looking for.
And that leaves us with one last really big question for the future. We just saw that baby boomers make up 53% of all sellers. They are essentially the gatekeepers for a massive chunk of the country's housing inventory. So what happens when this huge generation really starts to sell en masse as they retire and downsize? The answer to that question is going to shape the American real estate landscape for decades to come.